Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. This is episode 76 for Friday, March 22nd, 2024. My name is Justin Young. Joining me as usual are Alicia Utecht, Christina Ivey, and Mario Sanders. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hey.
Welcome back.
Feels like a low energy day, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I got lots of low energy on that hello.
Is it really only the first week back since spring break? Because it feels like it's been a month.
Well, you're in the middle of a show, so...
Yeah.
That's true.
Time's blurred.
And you worked on that show over spring break, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
so-
why.
Like, yeah, you've had no break. It's just been continuous for you.
I don't get a break until summer. It's fine.
Well,
But the show is amazing, I will say. If any of our listeners are in town, ways to say goodbye.
If you need a good cry.
Yes, bring the tissues. Ways to say goodbye at 8 p.m. in the Kleinow tonight and tomorrow still.
awesome. This is Craig's show.
Yes.
You should know.
Yes, it is written and performed by Craig Gingrich Philbrook, who I cannot emphasize enough how much of a legend Craig is. And he's too humble to give himself any credit beyond like some influence on performance studies as a whole. No, he is the impetus for performance studies recognizing personal narrative as legitimate on the stage. So this man will never give himself enough credit, and I am here to hype him up for him.
All right. Well, anything else exciting going on in people's lives?
I survived the week back. Yeah,
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, when I talked about what I was doing over spring break, I didn't think to myself, maybe you're doing too much. And so I had plans on Saturday and Sunday, and I canceled both things and just sat in my recliner and ate ramen and held my cats, basically. Because I was like, oh no.
You need a little cat therapy?
I did. And my cats are very good at that, and also like to eat what's left of my ramen if I pass out. So it works out.
Well, before we went on air, I was complaining. I just came out of teaching a class, and I'm standing up there lecturing, and my Apple Watch is going off the entire time as I'm getting like 50 text messages. And I said that, I get all these text messages during class, and I don't get any the rest of the day. So the rest of the day, I'll get like 2 text messages, but I get 50 as soon as I step foot into a class. And that I'm convinced that people are doing this so they know I won't like write back to them. Like it's the one time they can like talk to me and not with me. And they're like, well, we know he's teaching at 11. Hurry up, text him.
It's like their alarm goes off. It's like, text Justin now.
They very much have it set on their phone so that it comes up, Alexa, remind me. But yeah, this morning I ordered concert tickets. So this summer, Marion is having an 80s show where they're going to have Men Without Hats and Wang Chung and a few other bands.
When in the summer is this?
Is it June sometime, I think?
Early or late June?
I honestly don't know offhand.
Justin, you just bought the tickets this morning. How have you already forgotten?
Do you think I have any clue of what's going on? I bought tickets sometime for this summer.
Like,
June 6th.
This is why we have calendars on our phone, so that we can forget it as soon as we enter it into.
I bought these tickets, and it actually popped up on my phone.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
do you want to add this to your calendar? And I was like, okay, Apple, you think I'm really lazy and dumb? You're right.
Yeah.
But this is what you think of me. So that's exciting. I'm excited to go see that.
That is very exciting.
Yeah.
Get to see the safety dance up close.
I was gonna say,
Yes.
it feels like a very Justin concert, and I can't explain why, other than the fact that like your back to school shirt for this semester matched your Trapper Keeper that was like late 80s, early 90s inspired.
More 80s in my case.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, the fact that you picked that as this is a very Justin concert, like, you already know me. You've already figured me out.
Yeah.
You've got me completely pegged already.
Everything you need to know about Justin Young.
Yeah. Everything you need to know about me, like just consolidated, crystallized into one concert.
He teaches at 11 a.m., so that's when you text him.
Also, right now he's wearing a Bucky's like button-down shirt that is on point. Every time I see it, I'm like, yes.
This is what happens when you stop at Bucky's and your sister says, "Look, they have these shirts." And I'm like, "Only $17." It'd be crazy not to buy one.
Justin's great deal of the week. Bucky's shirt.
I believe my niece who's 13 now, I believe her reaction at the time was, "You're going to actually wear that?" And I was like, how do you not know your uncle better by now?
Also, it's called style. Look it up, sweetheart.
I'm going to wear it especially because you just said that.
I'm going to wear it when I come see you play basketball in front of all your friends.
With a big sign that has her name on it.
That's my
I'm
niece.
her uncle.
This is her uncle right here.
Do not get it twisted. She will tell you otherwise.
It's just a game she plays. We're all in on it. She's so funny like that. She's always like walking 20 feet ahead of me. Pretending like she doesn't know who I am. Kids.
Oh my God.
I'm only laughing because like I had my niece visit me over spring break, and it's like I went from being the cool aunt to I think I'm becoming that aunt of the like 20 feet away. In my Bucky's, well, not my Bucky's. Mine would probably be like, I don't know, something not Bucky. But it's like that whole thing. It's like you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's fine.
I mean, it's the same thing with like having kids, right?
Yeah.
Like eventually you're the coolest hero in the world for your kids until they get to, that
Puberty.
tween teenage.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, you're such an embarrassment.
Yep. Izzy's 10. She'll be 11 next month, and so I'm like, oh. I sent her all the poop emoji stuff when she was a kid. I was like, remember me? I'm the poop emoji aunt. And that doesn't help.
When we were kids, my sister got to be a teenager. She's a couple of years older than me. And we got to be teenagers. And my sister, we'd go on vacation. We'd be in a mall. And she would walk ahead of us. She didn't want to walk right with my parents and me, and sometimes my brother if he was with us, but he's quite a bit older. And so my dad, like, he just completely embraces this. And so he starts putting his index finger into her back. And he would just walk through the mall with his finger, like, stuck in her back.
Oh, no.
And she would, of course, is like, it doesn't bother me. And she would like just sit there and try to ignore him. And then eventually she would be like, will you stop that? And of course that just made his entire day, right? Like,
Got her.
Oh,
so I think about that a lot when I see particularly teenage girls who are like annoyed with their family. I'm like, it could be worse. Your dad could be poking you in the back.
oh man.
All right. Why don't we go ahead and move into what we've been playing? Alicia, what have you been playing?
So I have still mostly been playing Pokemon Go, especially with how nice the weather's been. And I'm like, oh yeah, sunshine. Yes, I have depression year round, but it's worse when there's no sunshine. When there is sunshine, I am happier.
Depression is generally worse during the winter, right?
Yep.
It's the SADS.
Yep.
Seasonal
It's the big sad.
affective disorder.
It's the big sad. But with the nicer weather, I've been going on more walks, playing more Pokemon Go. So that's been a lot of fun. I've also been able to, since OJ introduced me to an app that they used to do raids with people around the world. So being able to be on that and actually do some of these 5-star raids, whereas, I'm used to playing by myself and you will never beat a 5-star raid by yourself. You can be a 3-star raid by yourself, but not a 5-star.
Right.
So that's been a lot of fun. And it's just been really nice being able to like get out and walk. I think Thursday of spring break, I walked for like 2 hours, which is wild for me.
Maybe this is what the vitamin D deficiency. Maybe that's where it comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's been a lot of fun. And then the other thing I want to talk about is, again, obviously I do not have a PS5. I did not play, but I finished watching Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And oh my gosh. I love it. I'm back obsessed. I think I have about 50 tabs of fanfiction open on my phone right now. Not counting the ones that I just go back and reread on my fanfiction app. But I think it's really interesting because I'm not going to talk about anything from the ending because I think we're still early enough that I don't want to spoil things. But it is really interesting. You know, we've talked about how Remake and Rebirth maintained the wacky fun stuff from the original while also being super serious. But I will say I love 95% of it. I love 95% of the game. I think it's incredible. There's so much that I wanted to see that there's even a few things that like my little 10-year-old self, the first time she played the original game, like this is everything she ever wanted. But I think it's really interesting where avoiding
all the angst. It's a build-up for me.
Avoiding spoilers, I'm going to focus on one character in particular who I think they changed for the worse, and that is Sid Highwind.
Okay.
You know, and not even in terms of, you know, I get they introduce the whole rest of the party, and like I get not having Sid be playable and not having him in combat and all that, the same way that Vincent isn't in this game, the same way that Red 13 wasn't in the first game. He was there, but he was completely AI controlled. But they make Sid way too nice and cheerful. And I'm like, Sid, when you first meet Sid, he is jaded as all get out. He does have a heart of gold under that, but you gotta work to get to that. And here, like right away, he's helpful, he's cheerful, he's like, rah rah, let's go, I'm here for you guys, I'm supporting you, let's do this. And I'm like, where is my jaded asshole yelling at you to sit down and drink your goddamn tea?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that it's an issue that I have with a lot of media, not just Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, not even just video games. I have it with a lot of like movies and TV shows and books right now too, where the fact that a character is one of the heroes means softening out all of their bad character traits.
Right.
It's like, you know,
It's the sort of Mary Sueing of all characters, right?
in some ways, you know, it's not quite Mary Sue to the point of like, you know, they're not super powered and the one to be who everybody's in love with and the only one of the chosen prophecy, but it's very much well, this is a good guy, so we can't have any bad character traits because this is someone who we want to be a role model and we don't want people to emulate bad things.
Well, it's also like they're trying to, if it's the hero, right, they're trying to make him, or to where people can relate, or make it to where like you can find something of yourself. And so if it's just negative traits, then people will have a rough time relating to that character, which would then make it, I'm assuming, pretty hard to play as well, just because it's like, I don't want to play the jerk.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I think the original game did such a good job of like having those negative traits while still being a good character versus.
So it was more complex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I bring up the Mary Sue thing because I feel like so many characters in media today are like, they're instantly good at everything, and not just female characters, right? I know that's
Mary
where the
Sue,
term,
Gary Stu, same
Right.
thing.
but like they're instantly good at everything. They have no character flaws, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the really good example of that is the Star Wars films. Like Luke is whiny. People talk about it now. They're like, oh, Luke's so whiny in the original films. I'm like,
Yeah.
Why do you think he's relatable to like 8-year-olds?
Yeah.
And, Han Solo is this roguish character. And like,
He's
so
kind of a jerk.
he is in the first film, particularly.
Yeah.
Right. And so like both of those characters are relatable to children. For that reason, and even Leia's kind of a little snippy, right? Like
A little?
She's not.
I love her. She's very snippy.
She's not the like. I agree with everything, and I'm super friendly and happy, right? Like she kind of has this attitude that when you're a child, you would get in trouble for at least. And then when they made the new films, the sequel trilogy, the Disney trilogy, they kind of sanded off all those rough edges of the main heroes.
Yeah.
And I know everybody puts the blame on Rey, but like it's not just because Rey's a woman. It's like they did that with all the characters, and they're kind of boring for that reason.
Yeah, and that's just been a huge trend in media is to sand off the rough edges of the heroes.
Yeah,
and it's like I don't like it because I think especially you brought up the relatability with something like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or something like Star Wars where you have an ensemble. Like, it's fine to have that character who's perky, happy, friendly, willing to help everybody. But when every character becomes that, it becomes boring.
Also annoying.
Also very annoying.
The peppy, happy one, I'm usually like, oh.
I mean, I love the peppy, happy one.
That
but
makes
sanding out those rough edges really just, there's times where I am the jaded one. And like there's times where I do look at I don't want to spoil. There's a moment that okay.
we can talk about it more vaguely. We don't have to give it specifically.
Yeah,
but
I'm just sticking to Sid. It just is so. It's to the point where it's not really Sid.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't love that.
I think that's always the problem when you go back and you either revisit old characters, right? So like the new Ghostbusters movie comes out this weekend, and some of the early reviews are like, these characters aren't the original characters anymore. They're not acting like the people. And I know like the Star Wars sequels got a lot of grief over that with Luke, right? Like this is not the Luke of the original trilogy and that sort of thing. I think anytime you go back and revisit a character, if it's a story set 30 years later, that's really hard to like keep that continuity. But even like going back and remaking something and okay, well, who is this character fundamentally? Right? Like, and that's really hard to know. That's harder to know, I think, than people expect it to be, because everybody's like, oh, I know who that character is, and it's like, do you, or do you know what that character did?
Yeah.
And what it sounds like you're saying is, well, yeah, Sid's still doing a lot of the same stuff, but he's
not even really.
he's not like he's not the same person anymore.
Yeah. Well, and it's really disappointing because they did such a good job at it with all the other characters.
Yeah.
Again, barring sanding out one other moment that I think is a disappointment to have sanded out, but just Sid is just so blatantly not the same character. And
Sure.
I don't know. It's really a bummer because like I look at the Before Crisis game, which was a mobile game released in Japan only, and I have sat and watched the full playthrough of this 2008 mobile game, and like that did a really good job of, because it had the events that left Sid jaded in the original game.
Right.
And so like that did a great job of like having him be upbeat and excitable and also still rough, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And so, like, for them to do so well with all of the other characters and then so poorly with Sid, I'm just like, man, this is the one thing about the game that I don't like. Almost everything else is fabulous. I love the synergy abilities. I've watched all of the Gold Saucer dates, and every single one of them is handled perfectly, especially if you max out affection. That's all I'm going to say on that. But the way that they incorporate the broader compilation works into other locations in the game, the fact that Cisne is in Gongaga and you get more with her if you do the side quests, all of that is amazing. It's just this one little hang up that I have.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Anything else?
That's been the big things. I did finally play the Princess Peach Showtime demo, but I don't really have anything new to say that wasn't already said last time. So I'm still going to get the game this weekend probably, but I'm buying it with a $25 Target gift card, so I'm not paying $60.
I think that seems like a reasonable price, right? Like getting it down to, what, $35?
Yeah.
It seems like a $35 game.
Yeah. People have already uploaded full playthroughs. Like, they were uploading them yesterday. I'm like, it didn't release until today. I'm so confused. But it's like a 7-hour game from the full playthroughs that I've seen. I'm like, yeah, it's like $35.
I think a lot of times mom and pop shops break street date.
That makes sense.
So if you go to like little locally owned places, sometimes you can get a game a few days early.
That makes sense.
Sometimes Walmart just breaks street dates. I knew somebody who owned a bookstore, and they used to get mad because Walmart would just break street date all the time. And they said Walmart's so big, the publishers will never punish them for breaking street date. Whereas if they broke street date, it would have negative consequences for them. So who knows who did it? All right. Let's see, Christine.
Yeah. So I've been mostly just watching this week. Two particular things. There's a new event, Dead by Daylight, the Blood Moon, which usually they would do Chinese New Year, and it would be whatever themed the animal for that year was, and people were upset because they chose not to do that this year. But then they did this Blood Moon event that it wasn't as good. But one of the primary reasons I've been watching is because a lot of my research deals with like queer issues, basically. And the new chapter that I talked about with the new goth girl that everybody loves, and the weird unknown character, like for the villain, came out. And the reason that I've been watching for that is, so the unknown character that is the villain is just this weird, twisted, cryptid looking guy with this huge smile that looks very much like a creepypasta kind of thing. And the whole idea of it is that he's supposed to take on whatever form is necessary in order to attract people to him so that he can stealthily attack them, basically.
So kind of Pennywise.
Yeah. But it's like his normal form is not always a clown or anything. It's like he's that much of a shapeshifter, and so like more like Men in Black, the villain in that one that like uses the dude as a skin suit, right? That is much more what this guy looks like. When they released the entire chapter, obviously each of the characters had additional skins. And he had, right?
Men in Black.
Right, exactly. He also has two other skins. One of them looks like an old grandma, and one of them has him with long dark hair, a crop top, and a skirt. And what is interesting is the character was voiced by a trans actress because they specifically wanted somebody who would hit low register lines as well as high register. They did not tell her why. They just told her, hey, do this in a deeper register, do this line in a higher register. When they released the skin, the girl ensemble or feminine ensemble was the higher register notes and the other was lower. And so there's been a lot of complaints from the actress, and then that has bled into like the trans community that plays DBD, that in many ways it looks like they're being transphobic, basically, that they're sort of making fun of the ways in which like trans femmes especially present themselves because of the way that this character is. So it's been really interesting to me to see how the community has interpreted it, because like I try to watch videos on both sides of the issue, and I watched this video of this like one of the more toxic aspects of Dead by Daylight, this like bro that just had his own take on why this isn't transphobic, and I was like, no, listen, sir, put down the podcast stuff. Like you, shh, it's okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but is the reason people are upset because this character is obviously putting on a face and everything, right?
It's the same face as the masculine presenting. It just has what looks like a wig and a crop top and a skirt.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's more clear.
Yes.
I thought it was completely changing into a female form.
No, it's like it has the same deformed form. It changes its outfit. So so I thank you for asking, because that it allows me to clarify better.
Is this the twisty head guy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like his form, I keep saying him just because the whole thing is like his composition like allows him to take on whatever form he thinks he can use. And so I think that's where the creators were going with it. But the fact that they used a trans actress so that they could get, again, the lower register and high register, and
without telling that actor.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the really
that was her
part to me.
issue. When she posted on X about it, that was what she was talking about, is she's like, I might have embraced things a little differently in the way that I did the voice thing, but it just would have been nice to know, because otherwise it makes it seem like, again, she is a part of this, what seems to be transphobic representation. And again, she was like, I don't think that that's what the creators of this particular character were doing, but it definitely can look like that if you don't go deeper into the lore of the character itself.
And if you make this character as if it's putting on a voice, right, to trick people.
Yep.
And, to pass as a female.
Exactly.
Right? Like, that is the rhetoric of a lot of transphobia, right? Like, you're trying to trick me. You're trying to, like, mislead people by doing the girly voice or doing this. And
exactly.
So, okay. So that's why I wanted clarification.
Yes, no. I appreciate that. I've been in the thick of it. And so when I go to explain it to folks, especially folks who don't know the game, it's been having to, so I appreciate it.
No, I mean, I thought I kind of understood, but I wanted to make sure, and that helps a lot.
So I've been watching that. And again, why I really keep bringing this up is it's interesting to Dead by Daylight, again, is one of those interesting games because it's like the community following for the game and the commentary that they make on it, the fan art that they make about it. It really, I watched it from 2016. That's how long I've been playing the game. And so I watched it developed into this thing. And so when issues like this comes up, it's very interesting to me, the discourse that happens for this particular issue, especially because Behavior, the developer, overall has been very queer friendly. Like every Pride, there's like little charms that if you're a survivor, you can hang off your belt, or if you're a killer, you can hang it off the hook. And every June, they have a brand new Pride one that you can get for free, right?
I'm sorry, the idea of like I'm going to hang a pride hook, pride tag onto my hook I'm hanging people on.
Yeah.
It's a little weird.
No, I love it because I'm like, oh girl, she's gay. Like, this one's gay. This one's gonna be sassy. And honestly, sometimes that
You
means
get her, Freddie.
Yeah, you get no Mikey. This Mikey's gonna be wearing his hospital gown. Turn around, Mikey. Like that kind of stuff. I say that because like sometimes it means that I can like. And again, the weird communication that happens within them, like sometimes, like if a Mikey's staring at you, because that's his thing, is he'll stare at you to try to one up his thing or whatever. Sometimes I'll stare back and I'll just point at them, or I'll be like, do the come here motion. Like I just mess with them, especially though if I see that they have a queer tag. I wear a queer tag because it's I don't know. Anyway, so it's been really interesting to follow that. Especially again from a scholarly perspective. But I've also, I talked about Papers, Please. I talked about that You're Not My Neighbor. I realized why he has been, the person that I watch has been playing those games is because he was now going to move on to Contraband Police, which is a game that was released towards the end of 2023. And it's basically, so it's the same idea as Papers, Please, but it's more of it's like a 3D. So you are actually seeing these people. They drive up in their car. You inspect their car. You look for different contraband that can be there. You arrest them. And it's much more involved than Papers, Please, but it's essentially the same concept. And like some of them will try to be like, you find out that the Olympics is being held where you are. And this one guy pulls up and he's like, I'm so excited. I've been training for this ever since I was a kid. And you find something that prevents him from going to where he needs to be. And so that country loses. Then that country thinks that, something has happened and you sabotaged it on purpose. And so they attack. And it's the way that it becomes more involved is really interesting. Again, especially because if I end up studying these as much as I am playing them or watching them. And so just how we went from Papers, Please with this sort of underlying, narrative about what are borders, like what is citizenship, that sort of thing. And it gets elevated, I think, in this next iteration of that type of game. So.
That's really interesting. I think I've heard of that game. I haven't heard of the You're Not My Neighbor one, but I think I've heard of it. I haven't played it or really seen anything of it. But the fact that this has become this entire like subgenre, right? Yeah.
It's closer to like an open world. I mean, it's not fully open world, but it's like you have to take the people that you've held captive to work at the actual labor camps, and you have to take the contraband in to sell it, basically. And so it definitely is much more involved. Like, and at that time, like in transportation, the further you go in the game, people will start to ambush you in order to free your captives and or steal the contraband back. And so it's really interesting.
So it's basically the next step of Papers, Please.
Yes.
Like, what if we took this concept and tried to expand it into a more fleshed out game?
Yep, exactly.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. That's neat. All right. Is that it? Mm-hmm. Mario.
Yeah, so I played a lot over the break just because, like I said, I'm doing this little event, so played a lot of...
Any monster truck games?
No monster truck games. I did play Monster House. I think I've talked about that, the movie video game. That game is incredible.
That movie is really good.
I've actually never seen the movie, but... when I was playing it, though, there were people who said, the movie's really good. You should watch the movie. So I might have to try and find the movie on streaming or something, or rent it off of Amazon or something. But that game is so good. I think the last time I talked about it, I joked that, when a friend played it for the first time, he said it's like the meme of, Mom, I want McDonald's. We have McDonald's at home. It says, Mom, I want Resident Evil 4. We have Resident Evil 4 at home.
Yeah.
Except it's also really good.
And a kid's game?
And a kid's game, yeah. It's a really fun game. It's not that long. It's like maybe 4 hours. I think it took me like 3.5 hours. So it's you know, the thing that took me the longest is I was playing it on an Xbox controller, but it was the GameCube version of it, and they're QuickTime events. And for the GameCube, the X button is on the right and the B button is on the left. And on an Xbox controller, the X button is on the left and the B button is on the right.
Oh, that's just cruel.
So B would pop up, and there's this one section that took me forever because I could not get these QTEs. And so I had to like verbalize out loud, like X is on the right, X is on the right.
That's like one of those brain training games.
Yes.
Yeah, and like it was really interesting just because it would happen so fast. I would, hit the button without even thinking about it, and then like half a second later, I'd be like, "Nope, I'm dead." And so you'd have to go back and like redo this whole section. And there was in this particular section, it was pretty decent about checkpoints. This one, there were not many checkpoints, so that was frustrating. But it was more, my own poor gameplay than anything else. But I did just thinking about it in the sense of like how in tune we become with like the mapping of a controller, I guess. And I know we've talked about it, just thinking about like as a type of literacy, for like playing a game. But anyway, so that was one that I played that was it was really good. The other one that I played was James Bond Agent Under Fire, which I think was the first Bond to come out after the N64 games. And it's
That
fun.
sounds right. I remember that title being in that era.
I think there are 4 on the GameCube or that era. And so it was Agent Under Fire, Nightfire, From Russia with Love. I don't want to say there's one more. Maybe it's Not Tomorrow Never Dies. Whatever I don't know. But anyways, I think that it's an interesting game because I think this was the first Bond game to not be attached to a movie. Whereas all the previous ones had been attached to one of the films. And so this one and Nightfire, specifically like not being attached to a movie, I just think is really interesting because they play very differently. You're doing a lot of different things in the game. You've got like the car missions, and you've got just like a lot more like gadgets, and like some of the levels turn into like rail shooters. And so it's interesting to see that sort of shift into when they're not limited to like, well, we have to do what's in the movie.
We have to follow
the plot line.
This plot point. Yeah, because I mean that's always kind of weird. Like you go back and you play GoldenEye, and some of those levels are like what is it, the statue level? Like where you're like, well, this is so weird. Why would you make a level like this? And it's like because it's in the movie.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean Bond is one of those characters that you don't have to tether to one of those movies. Like if you had the license, I don't know who has the license for video games at least.
IO does, the Hitman people, because they were making a Bond game.
Okay, that's cool.
Which is like the most exciting thing in the world.
Super exciting, yeah. But yeah, like you don't have to tether it to one of the films. And I almost think that the games, I don't know if I'll say they got better. I think the story modes probably got better because they became more expansive in what they could do in terms of their gameplay.
And how do you feel that game holds up? Because I know that's a big complaint about GoldenEye, right? Like GoldenEye maybe doesn't hold up super great in a lot of ways.
Honestly, probably better, just because, again, playing a GameCube version, it becomes that dual stick.
Right.
So like aiming and moving are easier to control, whereas the first thing I have to do in playing N64, really any N64 first-person shooter, is change the control scheme. Because the default control scheme, I don't know why they do it like this, has the C buttons, so the right and the left C button strafe, move you physically left to right, and the up and down C buttons have you look up and down. And so then the control stick, left and right on the control stick has you like turning, whereas up and down on the control stick have you moving forward and backward.
Oh my
and
gosh.
So it's
as convoluted as it can be.
Yeah, and that's the default for like all of them, for the Bond games, for Perfect Dark, for Duke Nukem. That's the default for the N64 shooters. But there's always one that puts all of it onto one. And so like the first thing I do is change to whatever the mode is that makes the control stick be looking around and the C buttons are you moving in physical space.
That's right.
So the fact that there's a second stick, even though the C stick obviously wasn't great, is better than the C buttons for a shooter.
Yeah, the GameCube controller has some issues.
Sure, yeah.
But it is light years better than the N64 controller. I mean, that N64 controller is built to play Mario 64.
It's built for three hands.
Yes.
there's
that too.
One of the games that we played a while back was International Track and Field. And that game has you like actually mangling your hands to press all of the buttons at the same time.
I mean, have you ever seen some people who hold it like a claw?
I was about to say that. That's how I used to play Mortal Kombat and Smash Bros. With that. Is I would have the one and then hold it like this, but just because it was so much easier for me to hit all the buttons.
Yeah.
Was it Mario Party 1 where you had to spin and it literally like was indenting people's hands?
The game that the Switch the Switch remake that now has a warning before. Don't use the palm of your hands to play this game. It's like, frick you, Nintendo, I'm winning.
Only losers complain about the palm print.
But
the skin will grow back.
I forget. It was like, I think, so International Track and Field, like, it has you like, you're trying to hit like 4 buttons at once, but they're like on all the opposite sides of the controller. So yeah, you're just.
Well, I mean, do you want the gold medal, Mario?
I mean, that's what you have to do. There's some of them that it's just like it's not worth it, and you're mashing.
Simone
so much.
Biles does not complain about her hand. She puts a little chalk on it, and she gets to work. Greatest American gymnast ever.
Greatest gymnast in the world ever.
But to go back to the original question, I do think this one holds up pretty well. I haven't played Nightfire in a long time, but I think that one probably holds up pretty well too.
Okay.
But other than that, the other thing I've played a lot of over break and really since after break is Helldivers too. That game's a lot of fun. It's very silly. It's like part of me is like, I have to like remind myself like this is satire. You aren't actually endorsing these things, but it's like it's so easy to fall into that like role play of the thing. Like I'm messaging friends on Discord if they're like any democracy fans out there. But yeah, that game is so fun the way that I feel like it really does a good job of making you feel like this is what a completely untrained person would do. And like just it's like the very first thing I think I did was in the first like mission we did was I threw a grenade, it bounced off like the bug's like armor and like came right back at us. And so here we are now running away from this thing because the tutorial is like 5 minutes at most. And, you know, it's like it sort of plays up on that, like, here are all the basics that you need to know. And then you get your cape and you're like, and now you're a certified hell diver. It's just like, you know, you compare that to what, you know, obviously actual military training is. And it's just like, so it's, there's a lot you could do with that game in terms of like studying it. I remember when I came back, you know, I joked with Dustin, who's teaching the rhetoric class, like, man, if I had played this game sooner, I'd be writing my final paper about this game instead of the other one. Yeah, that game is a lot of fun.
But I think when you talk about that, you know, there's the reality that we see in movies of military experience, right? Which is you're, you know, like usually very heroic, very competent. And then there's the reality of when you read accounts of what actually happens in war and the sort of friendly fire, how often that happens, because you're firing a machine gun and the guy runs and you turn and you're not paying attention that your own, buddy is standing a few feet away from you. And like how much actual killings in or casualties in war are actually friendly fire related.
Well, and that happens so much in the game as well, because there are all these different stratagems that you use of like, having like an airstrike and all these sorts of things, and you just go, get sent flying. There's literally an achievement that I got last night that was get sent flying at least 25 meters from like the shockwaves of an explosion. And, but that, and so I think one of the things that the game does that's really smart, that like, if you were paying attention, which I think people are, but like if you were paying attention in terms of thinking about like the ways that in this game world, these Helldivers are really treated as like frontline fodder, are, a character dies, okay, you send in for reinforcements and you come back into the game. But like it makes it very clear, this is not the same character. Right. You are not playing as the same person. And that's, either like, sort of the gender of the voice or the has changed, their build has changed. And so it's like, this is just like, they are like, you are another cog in the machine, and here goes. And I remember there was one where a friend died. We sent in reinforcements. His pod lands. I'm shooting, all of these bug enemies, and he like spawns right where I'm shooting, and so he like instantly dies again. It's like, dude, I'm sorry, I didn't know what to do. He's like, no, that's just how it goes. But yeah, and so like I said, it's those moments where I think you realize, wow, this game, to do like if you were to like study this game or write a paper on it, I think specifically like a lot of like its rhetorical power goes to show, this is not like glorifying,
right,
war in any ways, even though there's all of like the silly, like when you're standing on your ship, the propaganda videos that get played of, the message of like, it's not that Super Earth hates aliens, it's that aliens hate freedom. And, you have to liberate the planets. And, one of them is, the automatons don't know what they did, incurring the wrath of Super Earth. So join your other super Earthlings, and, every man, woman, and child over the age of 7 is fighting for democracy. And so, it's just like, there's all this like silliness in it, but, and when you name your ship, you get these like preset options, or, sort of like a scrolling wheel that you can get. And so like, it's like the Leviathan of Peace, or, I think my friendship was like the representative of family values. And so these are like the sort of like preset options you get to name your ship. And so, like I said, I think there's a lot that you could do. And so, but on top of that, like I said, it's a very fun game.
As just a side note, something I was thinking of while you were saying that, good for you for being on top of things and already being like, oh, I already have my topic and working on it. Because Lord knows that I didn't have my like topic chosen before the end of March, and I would have jumped on this because, I didn't think ahead. So good for
that's
you.
More on Dustin for doing all other scaffolding assignments.
Smart.
But I was going to say, I don't think I'm actually going to write any of those papers. I changed my thing completely to take. He had a paper option and an exam option, and it's like I don't have the time or the energy to focus on a full paper. So I told him I'm just going to take the exam. He's like, that's totally fine. And so, but those are projects maybe for the summer,
for sure.
But yeah, it's a fun game, and I think the fact that it's only $40 is kind of incredible. I mean, there are microtransactions, but you don't need. They're very much optional.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's a fun game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when you're talking about like the propaganda videos and everything, that's heavily from Starship Troopers. Lots of people have acknowledged that and everything. But yeah, I mean, depicting that chaos of war, which is something that doesn't get depicted in video games very often. I mean, you play Call of Duty, and Call of Duty is very rarely captures that feeling of everything's going to hell and I don't know what's happening and I'm kind of scared in the situation. And, I think like the opening of Saving Private Ryan, the best part of that is how it depicts the chaos, right? Like, it doesn't depict it in the rah, wave the flag glory. It depicts it as utter chaos.
Yep.
And it sounds like this game actually does that, which I think is like amazing for a game to be able to convey that feeling of everything's going to hell, and like your worst enemy might be the guy standing behind you. And like that's a powerful message that interactive entertainment can convey in a way that like traditional, more passive entertainment can't. I think.
There are so many times. So like you have like main objectives that you have to complete. So you're given a time limit for each mission. And there are main objectives you have to complete and a number of like side missions that you can complete. And that affects like the bonus points you get, you know, to like spend on your ship and other upgrading weapons and all that sort of stuff. And there are so many times, but like literally just, you know, I think about it last night, but so many times we're playing this game where it gets to that chaos where extraction is like available, where the ship comes down, picks you up, and it ends the missions, where like we're fighting, and one of us will just say in the Discord, like, why don't we just like get the hell out of here? And we run to the extraction point because this is not going well, because you're given a limited number of like reinforcements that you can call in and all these sorts of things tethered to the the time limit itself. But yeah, there's so many times where it's just like, I feel like I'm running for my life. I'm not actually doing anything. My gun has no ammo in it.
Right.
So yeah, let's just get the hell out of here, and end this mission. So yeah, it does very well.
It's funny because post World War I, we get our sort of modern idea of basic training, and part of that idea of basic training, like, you know, you see it depicted in movies and stuff, of like breaking down the soldier so that they're not thinking, they're just responding, was because they found that so many soldiers during World War I never fired their guns. Like, you know, you'd have them, of course, that was heavy trench warfare. You'd have guys sitting in a trench just holding their gun, never actually using it because they were scared. And they were like, okay, we have to teach them not to think, like to more respond on instinct, right? I mean, I'm sure somebody in the military would say that's an over-exaggeration not to think, but like to more like, you know, in the way that when you play a sport, you're not necessarily like having deep thoughts about it. You're kind of reacting on instinct.
Yeah, I mean, there's the like famous metaphor of quicksand in a lot of sports, of like one thing goes wrong, and so you start like overcompensating for that thing going wrong. You only start sinking deeper, and like so much of that happens because of like overthinking.
Yep.
Right. I mean, the term that they're on tilt.
Sure.
Right,
Yeah.
in sports. So
not just sports, but even something like driving. You know.
Yeah.
Most, I guess I shouldn't say most, but a lot of really bad accidents when there's deer on the road. You know, the accident isn't from hitting the deer. The accident is from swerving out of the way. Right.
Or overcompensating when you hydroplane or on ice or something. That sounds really, that game sounds really amazing. I need to just play it.
You should definitely keep that on the list of things to write about. Especially because like even the history of like PTSD and the way that got studied and changed and how it's morphed. It's like this game is embracing some of the mental hoops that, you know, would lead to PTSD, why it makes more sense as opposed to like the glorification of war. And so I think that glorification narrative may be why we have a hard time accepting when vets come back with this PTSD.
Well, I think that's the thing, is because the gameplay is very much that chaos. Everything outside of the gameplay when you're on the ship is the glorification, right? Yeah. It's the, you know, you walk up to one of the NPCs like, it's great to have another hero on board. Wow. And so it's just like all of these, you know, one of those propaganda messages is basically like a Make-A-Wish situation where like the Helldiver is visiting a kid in like a hospital bed type of thing. And so, yeah, it really plays on that over-exaggerated sort of satire.
It's almost like this, the what we talked about, the Peoria police that used whatever. If they had used this game instead, it probably would have made more sense to me. Like,
Well, yeah, because I mean, Call of Duty is this glorification of war, right? Like, even when the storyline is like, war is bad, look, it's here on the home front in America, it's still this idea of you as the one-man army,
Yep.
right? Which is very much like not reality. I mean, it's the Rambo myth, right?
Yeah.
Like, one good soldier can turn the tide of the war, and it's like, no, that's wars doesn't work that way.
Yep.
And to have a game actually embracing that, like, it made me think, did you ever play Spec Ops: The Line?
No, I haven't. It's one that like I know I probably should, but I have not played it.
Yeah, if you want to write something about Helldivers, that would be a good companion piece to play with it.
There's another article. So that the conference that I go to, the one in Albuquerque that I went to a few weeks ago, one of the people there, or at least he's gone a number of times, he has a piece about Spec Ops: The Line. And so I think that you absolutely could write almost like a, here, this number of years later, writing about Helldivers in response. Because, you know, the one that I originally thought, like, oh, you could write like a sort of a response piece or an updated piece using this war of mine and the ways that subverts, you know, rather than you're playing as the military, you're playing as the civilians, just trying to survive. A game like Helldivers, you know, not better, but just you're going to get a different response to it.
Yeah. And with the rise of indie games, we've been getting more games that are willing to, like, you know, question that sort of raw America, 100% patriot narrative about war. You know, not anti-American games before we get any emails.
Right.
Well, that, or I think a really interesting one to play alongside Helldivers would be like an America's Army game.
Yeah. And, you know, like, America's Army is like a really interesting game because at the time that came out, it was super realistic. I mean, at least the early version that I played of that game, and I played quite a bit of it, you know, it was like one bullet and you're dead.
Yeah.
And that was very different than most action games. And so I remember playing America's Army, and you'd get behind a door and hide because you were like, I don't want to die. And that's something I never think about playing Call of Duty.
Sure.
Right? Or Contra, or, like, you know, going back even older. And, like, the fact that a game can make you have that emotional reaction, which is the emotional reaction a lot of soldiers have traditionally had, which is a very human reaction, is really interesting, you know, even though it's a propaganda piece at the same time for the U.S. military. All right. Anything else?
Nah, that's mostly it. Or at least that's mostly everything I would want to talk about.
Okay. Let's see. I have a few things to talk about. I played Llamasoft, the Jeff Minter story. So this is the newest thing from Digital Eclipse. Those who have made the Making of Karateka and Atari 50. This is their new one. This is following Jeff Minter, his company Llamasoft, their games dating back to the Commodore 64 up to more modern consoles. Jeff Minter is famous for making really weird games that happen to include llamas or camels in them, like Attack of the Mutant Camels and stuff like that, which is sort of a takeoff. I think I have the right one. I always get the names confused, which is sort of a takeoff of the Empire Strikes Back Atari 2600 game. So this is a huge collection of those games. Not all of the Llamasoft collection games. So more modern ones like Polybius and Tempest 4000 and Aka R are not included in this collection, which is kind of a pain. And then the other thing I'll say about it is that it's not as in-depth as those previous ones. Like the Making of Karateka is really cool because you have all these diaries that Jordan Mechner was writing at the time, and you have all these design docs, and you have some of that in here. It's just not as in-depth. So it is probably the weakest of these that they've done, but it's still really cool, and I think really cool if you've never played a Jeff Minter game before, and really have no like understanding of like why people talk about him and like sort of hallowed tones and everything, that he's maybe the closest thing we have in games still to like an auteur Like, this is a guy who has a really unique, distinct vision. It's kind of weird. And you see a Jeff Minter game and you instantly know, oh, that's a Jeff Minter game. So all of that's really cool. Speaking of Jordan Mechner, I'll go ahead and throw this in here now. My throat's a little... I'm going to have to take a drink of water.
Yeah.
Just discuss among yourselves.
I did Mario's in my class on Tuesday, Thursdays. I did this same exact thing. I was in this moment getting a good point, and then all of a sudden my throat went, no. You will not talk anymore. And I was like, I'm not like choking up. There's nothing emotional here. I just can't breathe. It's fine.
Which may be a sign we're talking too much. So.
Yeah.
Always kind of take it that way. Anyways, Jordan Mechner. Jordan Mechner is the creator of Karateka, and then more famously Prince of Persia. He wrote a book called Replay, which is basically a graphic novel about his family's history. The American title is Replay: Memoir of an Uprooted Family. Kind of traces the history of his family, including through World War II and Nazi occupation. But it had originally been released overseas in other languages. It got released into the U.S. in English for the first time. It just came out. I actually ordered a copy last fall. It arrived over spring break, and it's signed by Jordan, which is pretty cool for like a nerd like me. Like, I have something signed by Jordan Mechner. But it's a neat book, and I think it's kind of interesting how somebody like him, who is, most notable for his video game works, is going out and creating this graphic novel that is talking about all these issues about his family, talking about financial issues facing his family, and is going to have a much wider reach because of that video game background. And it's kind of an interesting way to like spread that message and everything. But anyways, that's out now and available. You can order it through Amazon. And so I have not read the entire thing. I've read a few pages, and it's cool. It's like a very interesting book. The other thing I played was Contra Operation Galuga, which just always makes me think of like the wolf in the Looney Tunes cartoons, like Galuga. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean, other than it's one letter different from Galaga.
I keep looking and thinking it's a typo, and I'm like, no, it's not.
No, it's not Operation Galaga, because that would be really cool if it was the Galaga aliens coming down and attacking.
That would be really cool.
See? This is a new Contra game. It's supposed to be maybe sort of a remake of the original. The first level is definitely a remake of the first level of the original Contra. It's done by WayForward, who has done some really good games in the past. I don't think this is a very good game. I think it looks sort of like a phone game, if you know what I mean. Like the graphics, it has kind of this very sterile, kind of boring look to it. And then just playing it plays fine, but it's just like Contra and Contra 3, The Alien Wars on Super Nintendo are two of the best action games ever made. If you're going to make a new one of those, it can't just be fine. It has to be great. Mm-hmm. It's like making a new Mario game. Like, nobody wants a new Super Mario game that's like just, this is fine, right? Like we talked about that being kind of the problem with the new Super Mario Brothers games. They're fine. They're not horrible. And that's the way this feels. It's like, well, you're kind of living up to that legacy, but not really, because what people expect you is to be like as cool as those original games. I would tell you play Metal Slug instead. Like, if you want something that Contra sort of feeling and everything, go play the Neo Geo Metal Slug games, because they're like fantastic. This just isn't probably worth your time. All right, that does it for what we've been playing. So let's move on to the news. The big news is that specs have leaked for the PlayStation 5 Pro. So this has been rumored for a while. We've talked about it on here before. Some specs have leaked. They've been corroborated by other people. So this seems to be legit. Whether these are the final specs or not is an entirely different thing, because specs can change up to a few months before release. But it says, so specs are always a little difficult because it'll be like a faster processor, but like you can't compare megahertz from one processor to another. They're not direct comparisons. But the people who are smarter about this stuff than I am have read over the specs and translated them that it would be about a 10% faster CPU. It's the same CPU, but 10% faster. There'd be about a 45% faster rendering for ray tracing from the GPU, which is, like cool. Like if you want ray tracing and everything, it means that ray tracing would work probably in most games because they can do it so much substantially faster. And that it would feature super scaling resolution, Sony's new technology, which is an upscaling technology very similar to DLSS on modern NVIDIA graphics cards on a computer. So that basically takes an image that's, say, like that's 1920 by 1080, and it uses black magic of some kind to upscale that and make it appear 4K, right? So I think in one of the documents it throws in the term AI, right? Because you have to use that term now. We never used that term before. We just called it upscaling, but like now we're going to say it's AI upscaling. But anyway, so, new PlayStation 5 Pro conceivably coming out this fall. Any interest?
It would depend on the price.
Yeah.
It would depend on the price, and it would depend on how much I could get for my PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
Because I would trade in mine to get the upgraded one, but like I probably wouldn't even do that. But I don't want to spend all that much money on it. So,
Yeah, I have a PlayStation 5. I don't know why I would buy this. They would have to really show me a substantial difference in some games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like a slight, improvement in ray tracing is just not going to be enough.
Right.
But like if you could show me every game's going to run at 60 frames a second with full graphic detail, like Spider-Man, like games that have those settings, the performance versus versus fidelity. If you could say, well, you don't have to worry about that. Every game is full fidelity, also at full performance. Maybe that's enough. But, games already look really good on the PlayStation 5.
yeah.
Like, I don't know how much this would be worth it to me because it's not going to be $500. So,
Yeah. I mean, is that what a PlayStation 5 is right now?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to imagine at the cheapest, this is going to be 600, 650.
I would bet 600 at least.
Yeah. Unless they make this 500 and they really drop the sort of original PlayStation 5, but I don't know if I necessarily see that happening either.
Yeah, I don't know that they would do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have been selling them for about $400 since Black Friday. That's when you got yours. And so, yeah, I mean, they could conceivably do something like that, but
I guess I can't imagine them selling it for 500. I could see them maybe going 400, 600 on
Right.
like the two models, but yeah, I mean, so I think that's like, even if, sort of hypothetically, if I were to seek out trading in mine, I'm not going to get, half of what the new one would cost. So no, like I can't imagine unless I come into a lot of money somehow.
Well, and I think all of this tech language makes zero sense to me beyond the 10% faster CPU. But like, wouldn't this run into the same problem that we've talked about before, where like you can make PlayStation and Xbox better and like do cooler things, but like if you don't have a TV that supports that.
yeah, I mean, when they did the PlayStation 4 Pro, they were able to sell that on the idea that it did 4K resolution, right? Because 4K TVs were just reaching adoption rate at that point where, the average person might buy one.
Yeah.
And now if you go to Best Buy, most TVs are 4K resolution, right? So like at least at a certain size, you get above 40 inches or so,
Yeah.
like you'll find most TVs are 4K resolution. So, but the problem, right, is, okay, well, the PlayStation 5 already does 4K.
Yeah.
Like, and they can't say, well, this does 8K because nobody has an 8K television.
Right.
Nobody's buying an 8K television anytime soon. I mean,
Yeah.
they sell a few, but, the average person's not buying that.
Exactly. I mean, it's the same thing with CPUs. Like when I was building mine in 2020, the person that was like helping me with it was like, well, if you don't get a monitor at this spec or above, like there's no point in putting the graphic card that I had bought to go in the computer, because it was like you won't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
So so unless you're like willing to also upgrade your TV, if you don't have one that fits, then, but,
Well, I think a lot of people have run into that with computers, right? They're still using a 1080p monitor, and it's like, well, you can put out 1080p graphics easy on this monitor. So unless you're going to invest into a 4K monitor or something that does HDR or something like that, like a lot of this extra power is just going to waste.
Yeah, I guess my only, and maybe I'm not fully understanding it. I guess my only pushback on something like that is game requirements. Games require a certain power of like a graphics card. Even if you can't tell the difference on your monitor, you wouldn't be able to run it with a lesser sort of graphics card.
that's true.
But I do understand sort of the logic of if you don't have a TV to make the difference. Or I guess for a PlayStation 5, but I think that would be my one pushback on like making the comparison to a computer.
But the difference between running a game on your computer at 1080p versus at 4K is a substantial difference in power. So, like, you can run a new game at 1080p with a lesser graphics card than you need to run it at 4K.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, if you go onto like Steam and it lists like here are the requirements, it will not even run if you have a certain lesser card.
It usually, though, they, depending on how old it is, right, they usually go towards like a lesser thing so that more people can buy it. And so it's like, it's one of those things that you can't experience it at the full capacity.
Oh, like I said, I'm playing Helldivers like it's a PS2 game with like the way the graphics look.
Yep.
But I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, I still need even the PS2 level graphic card in order to run that, which is like, it's not that bad of a graphics card, but new games now require the top end of a thing.
For sure.
You're absolutely right about that, but I mean, you can be a couple of generations behind in graphics card and still run pretty much all modern games.
Yeah, that's where mine is now. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna have to update it. But yeah.
And I mean, I think that's the issue that you run into with this, right? Like, they're not going to make games that only work on the PlayStation 5 Pro.
Right.
So
At least not intentionally, I would think.
right, there may be those games that the frame rate is so low on the regular PlayStation 5, you wouldn't want to play it.
Because I think that was the case with The Last Guardian for the PlayStation 4 to the PlayStation 4 Pro. Was a PowerPoint slideshow on the original PlayStation
Mortal
4.
Kombat Switch.
And it actually ran on this. So like that's would be the thing. Like, if they were to start developing games where like the baseline is the Pro, I mean, I still probably wouldn't buy it, but I think that would be a
The only
mistake
thing that
on
would push
Sony's,
you to do it,
or development studios sort of like plan in the first place.
Yeah, if Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out and it runs like below 30 frames per second on anything but the PlayStation 5 Pro version, right? Then I can see that being a reason for people to upgrade. But short of that, right? Like, I think most people are going to be looking at this going, I already have a PlayStation 5. I mean, maybe if you don't have one, this is, probably buy this one if you have a 4K television, the equipment that would benefit from it, right?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a few weeks ago. That's why I got the PS4 Pro, because it was the first one I got.
Right.
I never had the original PlayStation 4. So if you have the funds to spend probably whatever the difference is between the original PlayStation 5 and the Pro, probably you should buy the Pro. But But yeah, otherwise I don't know. As of right now, it's hard to imagine upgrading.
Yeah. Same for me. Let's see. Speaking of Sony, they have paused PlayStation VR 2 production to catch up to demand. So those were their words. So apparently Sony has a bunch of PlayStation VR 2s just sitting in a warehouse somewhere. And they're saying, hey, we've produced enough of these. We don't have to produce anymore until like we catch up to that demand. This feels an awful lot like Sony saying, hey, this thing is dead.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I was like, that seems like the opposite. And then until you read it, it's like, oh, the demand is so low that we don't need to make any more.
Yeah, well, demand increases till we sell all these, right? Like, yeah. So we talked about this at the time. The price of that PlayStation VR 2, that it was $550 at launch. You were over doubling the price of the PlayStation 5. That it just turned most people off. And when you have something like the Oculus Quest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I saw that on sale at Walmart the other day for $200 with a $50 gift card. And so, you know, like if you just want to experience VR, that's a pretty decent way to do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And pretty much every big game is on that system. I mean, there's some exceptions. There's some things, you know, the exclusive PlayStation games and stuff like Half-Life, Alyx, but pretty much everything else that you want to play, Beat Saber and all of that is on there. So you might as well invest in one of those, I would say.
Yeah.
Plus that thing can connect to your computer, whereas the PlayStation VR 2 still can't.
Yeah, I feel like I read somewhere that they have plans to make that connectivity, but I don't know when that's supposed to be.
Yeah, there was a story that they were working on making that happen, but you know, it's by all means, by all like word on that, that's a very well made headset. It's just hard to justify the price.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I feel like I've heard that like when it comes to the headset itself, it's among the best of like a VR headset, but it's limited sort of connectivity and it's limited library. Yeah, why would you spend all that extra money on it?
Let's see. They announced a sequel to the Super Mario movie is coming April 3rd, 2026. So 2 years almost from right now. We'll get a Super Mario movie sequel. I'm actually kind of surprised it's taking that long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I figured they would fast track that, but
Did they see? I thought that they were very careful. I thought that they were like, it's set in the same universe.
oh, they might have. I think maybe they said that there would be a sequel or a new movie. Yeah.
Set in the same universe.
I think you're right, because that led some people to suspect it could be the Luigi's Mansion movie that's kind of hinted at in the first one.
Yeah. Or even like, give us a Daisy movie.
I say, doesn't it end on the Yoshi egg?
It ends
or
on the
something
Yoshi
like
egg.
that? So-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, none of us want a Yoshi's Island movie.
Honestly, no.
Look, this is Illumination. They made 2 Minions movies.
Oh no, Baby Mario is a minion.
No.
I was thinking about how, like, for an hour and a 40-minute film, like that Baby Mario cry, though. Just over and over and over again.
I mean, have you played the game?
Yeah.
It's more than an hour and 40 minutes.
I haven't played the game. What were they introduced on Mario Tennis on 64? And I got enough of it from that with him going, yeah, like whatever.
Well, but just think the way that they'll like upscale or AI in you know,
That
what's
sound
the word
effect.
what's the word I'm looking for? Like effect. I don't know what I don't know. You know, like it's gonna be Baby Mario, but as Chris Pratt. Like, you get Chris Pratt getting the Baby Mario cry.
No.
Oh, poor OJ. That's OJ's worst nightmare.
Chris Pratt shouldn't have even been Mario in the first place. Like, no.
But he is.
I
You
know.
have to accept
I
this.
know. No, I do not.
You know what's even worse? Have you watched the trailers for the Garfield movie?
I have.
No, I have not.
Where
my God.
it's Chris Pratt as Garfield, and he's terrible.
It's a fine trailer until Garfield starts speaking.
Why does Chris Pratt keep getting these?
He's famous.
Yeah, I think he's a name that kids like.
No.
He was, he was good in like the Parks and Rec stuff. I think he definitely launched from that, and then obviously Guardians. The Guardians movies are good,
Yeah.
and he does. I don't know. I don't see him in those movies and be like, oh, Chris Pratt. I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah.
I think he's mostly good as Star-Lord.
It's that conversation we've had a lot about, like, he's a fine actor. And
He has
and
like bad opinions.
He
acting
is-
and voice acting are two different skill
He's
sets.
derpy. Like, that's what makes him a good actor.
I think that's, I think most people's problem with him is just that, he has bad opinions,
Yeah.
which is totally valid to, not want to like support stuff that he's in and being, annoyed that he's all over the place. But yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. I think my opinion is sort of like Christina's, that I think he has very limited range as an actor,
Yeah.
which makes him really good in Parks and Recreation
Yes.
and really good in Guardians of the Galaxy, because he is playing
Himself.
I think he's playing a character very similar to himself in those. And then once he gets outside of that, like the Jurassic World movies, I think he's terrible in those movies.
Yeah.
Like, he's not offensive, I guess, but like, I just think he's miscast. I don't think he has the leading man like chops to do that. And then when he gets to voice acting, like, yeah, he's inoffensive in the Mario movie. He's not very good in it, but like, what I've seen of those Garfield trailers, he's horrible in those. Like, he's terribly miscast in them.
it's like on the level of looking back at the first Sonic trailer.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah. And I say that as someone
What if we
who, I'm sorry,
petition?
Justin, isn't a huge fan of Garfield, but like it's on the level of being as bad as that first Sonic trailer.
Do we know anything else about the Garfield movie?
Samuel L. Jackson's playing his dad.
Garfield's dad?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
Sorry, every time I think about Samuel L. Jackson, I think about him reading that children's book, especially. It's like,
Go to the fuck to sleep.
yes. So I'm please.
Rated R Garfield animated film, strictly so that Samuel L. Jackson can curse in it.
Or him in the Pulp Fiction memes. Like, that's the Samuel L. Jackson I want to be in the Garfield movie.
What's with all these fucking snakes and this lasagna?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, but like, I mean, I agree with you. I think in Parks and Recreation, Guardians of the Galaxy, I actually think he works really well in both of those. And I just feel like he became, like, Hollywood does this every once in a while. They'll be like, here's our next leading man or leading woman. And then they just
Well, they do it all the time with teenage actresses too.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
we talked about that.
and they just like cast them in everything. And you're like, oh no, but like, they're horribly miscast in this. Like, they shouldn't be in this. What's his name? The guy from Avatar, the lead actor, the Australian. Yeah, see, he's completely forgettable.
Well, he doesn't. He's a blue alien in that movie as well.
Well, but in the
For most of
first film,
movie.
he-
I've never
He's
seen the first
in
one.
a wheelchair, and then he's a blue alien.
Yeah.
But even he spends 2/3 of the movie as Blue Alien.
Sam
Yeah.
Worthington, that's his name.
I did not know that.
But around the time that first Avatar film came out, he was the new like leading man in Hollywood, and they cast him in everything. And he's such a dull actor. He's so boring. Like, he has no charisma. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, he's fine in like little bit roles, but like, he doesn't have that it factor, right? Like that Samuel L. Jackson has.
The only actor who should be in every movie ever is Jack Black.
Okay.
Speaking of people in the Mario movie.
Yeah.
Now, Jack Black would have been good casting for Garfield's
He would have been
dad.
amazing.
Oh, man. He was too busy doing Kung Fu Panda 4 and recording his version of Baby One More Time, or Hit Me Baby One More Time.
Which is amazing, by
It's
the
really
way.
good.
By the way, that's the only good part of that movie.
Oh yeah.
It's fairly forgettable otherwise.
Sad.
So, anyways, that's enough about the Mario movie. We went completely off
Talk
track.
about it. Look forward to us talking about it every single week for the next 2 years.
Yep.
Wait until they introduce the new cast members,
Yeah.
and like all of us collectively lose our minds when they introduce who's playing Yoshi.
Oh God! Oh no!
Just like Yoshi with like a normal human voice.
Like the
I'm
first.
just Who
would
having
be the
flashbacks.
worst?
I'm just having flashbacks to the SNL Mario Kart trailer.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking.
Pedro
Yoshi.
Pascal.
It's gonna. Oh God.
I'm bisexual.
Okay. Daddy can play whatever he wants. I'm just
No,
saying.
but Pedro Pascal was Mario.
Still, he can play whatever.
Yeah, no,
he
that would have been great. But
I just see like they're gonna have Yoshi come out and be like Yoshi, and then be like, hey, what's up? You know?
like a Sam Elliott
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
as Yoshi.
Honestly, that would be
That would at least be interesting.
right.
Yeah, and the new one, I'm hoping to. I mean, more importantly, it's got Wario and Waluigi have to be in the new film.
yeah.
Yeah, man.
Do you think
Please
they're
cast
actually
Proton
going to?
John as Waluigi. That's all I ask.
Do you think they'll actually
Proton
put?
John.
Do you think they'll actually put Waluigi in it?
If they're smart.
That would sell. I mean, like, I know it's like a joke. People would go see it just because
Yes.
Waluigi's.
Yeah.
They would
People
be. They
would
would be
buy the
so
Waluigi
much
merch.
more excited
Yes.
because of Waluigi's inclusion in the film.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they will not do anything with him in the games. mean-
Exactly. Give
I
him
think
his
you put
proper
him.
venue.
I think that would make it even better. Of just like a,
Yeah.
what is the whole joke of like Mike Wazowski in Monsters Inc., where like his
Yeah.
face is always covered, like. You like allude to Waluigi being there, but he's like never on screen or like
You just
never,
see
never hear
Wario
his
in a
voice.
shadow.
He's like cut off, before he starts talking every time.
Or you just say, wah, like randomly.
Is framed so that his head's cut off in every shot. So you see his body there, but like his head's never shown.
It'd be incredible.
Yeah.
I'd still go watch it.
I would be even more excited to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that's the best.
Waluigi gets Mike Wazowski.
That's, to me, the only good way to include Waluigi. Like, you make a joke out of how disrespected he is as a character. Let's see.
Bring back John Leguizamo since he didn't get to voice Luigi. He can voice Waluigi.
There you go.
I liked who they had voice Luigi though, but I also have a very I love It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
and yeah.
No, he did a good job.
Yeah.
Let's see. MultiVersus is returning May 28th. So if you have forgotten in the last year since MultiVersus mysteriously disappeared, MultiVersus is the Warner Brothers Smash style game that has all the Warner Brothers characters like Daffy Duck and Scooby-Doo and Shaggy and LeBron James, everybody's favorite Warner Brothers character. So they announced that it is coming back. Last year, they basically just put out an announcement and said, hey, thanks for taking part in our beta test. And we are going to take the game down and we're going to go work on it. So they spent the last year apparently working on it. They claim they have rebuilt the entire game in Unreal Engine 5, that they have updated the graphics, updated the online netcode, and plan to relaunch it in May. I played this last year when they put out the original. I guess it was the year before when it originally came out. And I thought it was interesting enough. It was better than most of those platform fighter games outside of Smash Brothers that I've played.
That's what I remember you saying is the one that that actually felt good to play as opposed to I remember trying to play the Nickelodeon one at Playing for Pets and just being like, this is awful.
Right. Like it was a much better game than that. And some of the other ones that I haven't been able to get into, I know other people have. So I thought it was a good game, but after a year, it's just so much momentum lost on this game. It would be really weird if this game manages. I can't think of another game that has been released and then they just took it away for a year and said, hey, we're going to rework this, outside of Final Fantasy 14 when they did that with it.
Yeah. Well, and Final Fantasy 14 was broken and needed it. MultiVersus was working really well and everybody was hyped and loved it.
Yeah, at the time, they had kind of noted that there were major changes that they needed to do, like the netcode stuff and some other issues with the game, and that they couldn't do that while the game was running. And so they really needed the game to stop and like do all that work behind the scenes. So I guess we'll see. I mean, my fear on this game is, does any of that community that it had been building come back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I kind of think, like, have they already blown like their best characters? Because like that beta had all the like major characters you kind of think of surrounding Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, okay, is, you know,
Like Batman in that, or
Batman
some of
was
the-
in it. I think Superman and Wonder Woman both were too.
yeah. So they had the three of them. They had the
The Scooby-Doo gang.
Game of Thrones. Because remember,
like
the Scooby-Doo gang could, one of the special moves for
Velma.
Velma was that she would call the cops, and the cops would show
Oh,
up,
that's right.
and they would throw you into the back of the police car, and like you would like lose energy. And so you could do that to LeBron James.
Yeah.
I never played it, but I do remember us talking about that.
Christina, did you not remember that? Yeah, and then they changed it to the Mystery Mobile instead because it's so much better for a bunch of teenage kids to be doing it.
I mean, I would argue that it is a lot better, but
yes.
yeah, sure.
But
There's bad and there's bad.
and there's like, oh god.
Yeah, it was really just poor timing and not thought out about.
Are there like Harry Potter characters in that? Doesn't Warner Bros. Own some level of Harry Potter?
I don't know how much they do anymore.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
I guess, yeah, because HBO is connected to Warner Bros. So yeah.
I mean, they still make the games, right? So the Hogwarts
right.
game was Warner Brothers, but
Yeah, even
My-
with the new show that they're talking about, that'll be on HBO. So
right. But my understanding is that Rowling has to approve everything herself.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have been surprised if that's why they weren't included, but that
potentially
would
they
be
put the
another
Hogwarts Legacy
franchise that
characters.
I could imagine being included that would make people probably somewhat interested.
yeah, potentially they put the Hogwarts Legacy characters into it.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Didn't know that there were like established characters in that game. I thought that was more of a create your own character.
Well, I mean, they have the NPCs and everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, who knows, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's the issue is like how much IP is actually owned by Warner Brothers and how much of it is, oh, we made this, right? Like, so
Yeah.
Warner Brothers made the Barbie movie, right? Wasn't that Warner Brothers?
Was it?
Maybe I have that wrong.
I mean, I would
Maybe they made-
love a final smash of all the Kens singing "I'm Just Ken."
Yeah, it was Warner Brothers.
Yeah, but see, they don't own that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, that's
owned
still
by
Mattel.
Partner with Mattel.
So they'd have to work out a separate deal with them to put Barbie into the game.
Well, again, Alicia would probably know. Does Warner Bros. Own DC?
Yeah.
They
Okay.
well, they own like the movie rights
No,
and
they.
the television. They don't own DC Comics.
I think they do. I think they own all of DC. Like Disney owns all of Marvel.
I guess my question was like the inclusion of like the superheroes. Wouldn't that require the same type of deal? But maybe not if they own DC.
I think they
Holy.
own them like they do the Warner Brothers characters.
Okay.
The Looney Tunes characters. Excuse me.
No. Okay, so DC Comics is owned by Time Warner, which is the parent company which owns Warner Bros.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think the thing that game just will run into is like, did they already like release their most interesting characters? Like, I think Marvin the Martian was one of the last characters they introduced, which was like, felt very 90s of them, like when Marvin the Martian was on t-shirts and everything.
Yeah.
So,
I want the. Does anyone else remember the sci-fi show that was Daffy Duck?
Duck Dodgers.
Yes, I want the Duck Dodgers characters. That's what I want.
but is that just a skin for Daffy Duck?
No, whole new characters.
Yeah, I think if you were to do Duck Dodgers, you could make it a different character.
Yeah.
I mean, like I know that like thematically that doesn't make sense, but like it
But
doesn't
it's
need to
Looney
make
Tunes.
sense.
Nothing makes sense.
At least in a fighter as well. I mean, you can have multiple Marios in a
Yeah.
match as well.
If we have 17
you
million,
have Mario
Link,
and Dr. Mario and all of it.
Then do we get Daffy Duck and Duck Amuck?
You just get 17 different Daffy Ducks.
Yeah.
Was the whole character roster.
So it's basically the Dragon Ball Fighters, where like there's 20 Gokus in that game. Hey, I actually think that's a cool game.
Yeah.
But like as somebody who doesn't watch Dragon Ball, like I was like, I don't know. Like this is all Goku. That's
Which
Goku, right?
iteration of Goku would you like to play?
And even when it wasn't Goku, right? It's like that guy looks like Goku.
And probably the powers are probably similar. Unless you're playing as Piccolo or like Hercule.
No. 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 But mostly, yeah.
I was ready for a full rant about another character who
It is not the
Goku.
day. It is not the day. I'm not going to be the Dragon Ball person on this podcast. Not today.
I was waiting for her to throw down about power levels with you.
Is it blue hair? Or is it just regular blonde hair?
Well, see, you're talking about the different iterations of Goku. I mean, like all of the other fighters and the characters in the game are going to play similar to Goku.
No. No.
I hate to break it to you, but like Raditz and Vegeta are gonna be similar to Goku.
Okay, but that's because they're all from Namek. Not Namek, that's Piccolo. They're all from the same place.
Yeah, but that's like half of the characters in the show.
No.
At least the characters that you can fight as are like 80% Saiyan.
No.
I wish y'all could see the crossed arms, the shoulders in, the pout that Christina is giving right now.
I'm fussy.
Apparently about Dragon Ball.
Listen.
Like you found her thing.
Oh my god.
Locked you two in a room with just like a
Dragon Ball on one side, monster truck games on the racing games on the other.
have you two go at each other.
Who comes out more miserable in the end?
All right. Let's see. Monopoly Go has made over $2 billion since its 2023 launch.
I'm sorry, what?
So Monopoly Go is a phone game, I believe, that I see people on Facebook,
yeah.
playing.
I also get a lot of advertisements for it on TikTok.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why this surprised me when I saw it on the sheet, because I was like, I thought it was just like a meme, you know what I mean? Like this.
It's not even a real game.
Yeah.
I definitely know people who play it. I have never played it, but
I have not either, and I just thought this was fascinating,
Is
right?
it like
that's
Pokemon Go? Or is
no.
no, I think it's closer to Monopoly.
it- yes, but like.
Well, like no, like actual Monopoly, like you're going around the board. Like you're not just one.
I don't think that was as smart as it came off.
Just the stare.
I just meant
Just the dryness of that delivery.
Man,
10 out of 10, Mario.
Mario's already going after her. They're not even locked in the room yet.
I meant in the sense of I think it's closer to like generic.
Yes,
the
yes.
play is close. I don't think
I
there's
got
like you moving around.
I got it, but I will say it took me a second to get it.
The tone of Mario going, no, dumbass. I think he's like Monopoly.
Just the sheer dryness, the dry state, the look. Just everything about that was perfect.
I was like, do you go out searching for?
you gotta find Go.
Yeah,
You have to find Boardwalk.
Yeah. Boardwalk was actually the one I was thinking of. I was like, what's that really expensive one that my sister used to always buy, and it would piss me off, and I would steal it from her.
You have to go to a literal boardwalk.
Yeah, right.
And if you go under it, you'll hear music start playing.
There's like a train
Under
station, the water
boardwalk.
depot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
No, I don't think it's like that.
Oh,
I also was thinking that though, so I'm glad that you asked and that Mario got to be so.
it's fine.
Sorry, it was apparently the same thing as Lost is I know what Lost is.
Yes. Oh, that was towards me too, wasn't it? I get it, Mario. I get it.
All right, I think we need to move on. But yes, Monopoly Go, huge. I think the point to kind of raising this is we always talk on here about the biggest games in the world sometimes are games we never talk about.
Yeah.
And so you look at something like, yes, Clash of Clans, you're keenly aware that game was huge in its time, maybe not as much anymore. But that there's games like this that come out on the phone and are making $2 billion. And like, if you asked me what game came out last year that made $2 billion, even though I see people play Monopoly Go on Facebook all the time, this never would have crossed my mind. Like that they were making that kind of money. That's level of popular. So anyways, let's see, something a little happier. maybe nobody
Less
will
controversial.
nobody will have any attitude over it. We'll see.
I can see Christina. She's eyeing some of these games like, that got added.
I've got attitude on this one.
The 2024 World Video Game Hall of Fame finalists have been announced. This is from the Strong Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. So they've been doing this for the last few years, each year putting out some games, whittling that down to some finalists, very similar to, like, say, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, how they do. And then it seems like what I've seen most years, they put in 4 games of the finalists. And I don't know if that's a hard and fast rule or if that's just, how they kind of select. But they do this, they have a committee, but then they also have some public voting as part of this as well. And they use some sort of secret sauce formula to figure out who wins for that. But anyways, they announced the finalists. I thought it would be interesting for us to look at the finalists and talk about them.
So you want us to argue. That's what you're setting us up for. Well, it's time for a happier segment.
There's no attitude in this one.
I mean, apparently that's the way you're interpreting it, Mario. You've already started on that today, so why not just roll right into it?
Claim your stake on which 4.
Justin's like the
fight for
person
it.
who used to book people on Jerry Springer.
I think you're the Jerry Springer guest.
Yes. I knew what I was saying.
I wouldn't say that.
The Saluki Springer cast.
Anyway, so the nominees are Asteroids, Elite. Elite, if you don't know, is a space combat game. More famous, there was a Elite Dangerous that came out a few years ago on PCs. Guitar Hero, Metroid, Myst, Neopets, Resident Evil, Sim City, Tokimeki Memorial, which my understanding is one of the first dating sims. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Ultima, and You Don't Know Jack. So, Mario,
Yes.
would you like to argue which 4 of those you think should get in?
I mean, I would honestly be surprised that Metroid and Resident Evil weren't already in it.
Yeah.
So I mean, those 2, personally, I would put Tony Hawk in there. And I would probably put Neopets in there as well. Those would be the 4.
Yes.
I mean, I think, I don't know if something...
I can't deal with these kids.
These damn youths. Okay, so Justin's going to have the boomer takes of this.
Yeah.
Hey, you are forcing my hand.
Christina
Neopets?
also seems pretty shocked about Neopets, but I am with you.
Neopets?
I mean, I never played Neopets, but I mean, it goes back to what we just talked about. That was such a popular game for a generation and demographic of people that... I think that is an introduction to video games for so many people.
And here's the other thing about Neopets is Neopets was one of those, how many games now, we've talked about this a lot in the past, but how you used to be able to go online and play on the Cartoon Network website, you could play different online games about the Teen Titans and Foster's Imaginary Home, and Neopets was that.
Justin, think about how much you loved your Tamagotchi.
I did.
That's how we loved our Neo.
Justin's like, I killed that movie.
The only Tamagotchi I ever remember having was the Chow Garden on Sonic Adventure. So,
But yeah, I mean, I obviously all of these are more than deserving.
Yeah, it's like for me, I was with you on Metroid and Resident Evil and Pro Skater. The other ones that I had, I was thinking in terms of like, what are things that were popular and also like introduce new genres and or like different ways of playing. So I have like Guitar Hero as being a top, and then you don't know Jack only because it's one of those games that like one again like bending the genre, but also the way in which you interact with it now and all the different iterations, and also folks who think that they aren't gamers.
Yeah.
This is something that's accessible.
Yeah, I think
Just
that's
like Neopets.
the Jackbox. I mean, the Jackbox games. I mean, we've talked so highly about those for however long. The other one that I think, I didn't say it, but along those same lines, just in terms of like it's. I mean, you could talk about the legacy of all of them. I think Myst is also is another one I'm surprised isn't already in there.
Honestly, there's several of these. I'm shocked Asteroids isn't already in there. And Metroid, Resident Evil, valid. But yeah, I think my four would probably be Guitar Hero, Metroid, Neopets, and either Pro Skater or Asteroids. I can't decide between the two of them. Yeah, because those are all games that like we're all shocked that Metroid's a new introduction on this list, but like Guitar Hero and Neopets being out there for these are games that you don't have to be a quote unquote gamer to play.
Metroid feels like one of the games like for sports fans out there, like the guy who's nominated for the Baseball Hall of Fame every year, but there's always like 5 other players that are like, we have to put this guy in. And so there's like always like that second, the like guy who's just the person who's just left off the list.
Yeah.
But like, they're eventually going to get in. They deserve to be in there. But every year there's like, we got to put this person in because this person is like very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the problem anytime you start doing a Hall of Fame like this is what are the criteria?
Sure.
Yes.
Are you looking for who was the biggest, right? Are you looking for who had the greatest influence?
Yeah.
Who was the biggest for their time? Who has the like biggest legacy?
Right.
Right? Because there's games that were huge in their time, and like everybody has basically forgotten about them.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why I said the thing about like genre bending, or even with Guitar Hero, like needing a new controller, but it not being like the ones that came with the original Nintendo, it being one that like has stuck around for the various iterations. Like,
even, so many things now. Beat Saber and like Trombone Champ wouldn't exist without Guitar Hero.
fair.
Yeah, and I think you have to have those sorts of conversations, at least know like what you are considering for criteria with something like that. Because if you're just saying like, what's the best game, right? Like we only want the best games in there, then I don't put Guitar Hero in there. I put in Rock Band.
Yeah.
Right?
It has the drums too.
Yeah,
That's the one
and
that
the
I
singing.
have.
And I think they're better games. Like they're better made games. Rock Band 2 is probably, or maybe the Beatles Rock Band. Like you put one of those in there. But I completely understand if you're talking about influence, then the original Rock Band's the one, right? Like that's the one that creates the genre.
Well, and I guess the other question becomes, is this game or is this franchise? Because like I think you could argue that the original Metroid, as influential as it was, they're far better Metroid games as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most people would tell you Super Metroid is a much better game.
Yeah.
I think it is game, but like, you can make an argument that Metroid,
Of course.
like, is the first major step in defining that genre.
Absolutely.
The Metroidvania, right? Like, there had been games before it, but like, that's the game that lays the groundwork that Super Metroid's going to build on, right? And sort of perfect, I guess, in a lot of ways.
Which is the same reason to do Guitar Hero rather than Rock Band.
Sure. And maybe you put Rock Band in there someday. Maybe you put Super Metroid, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're just putting these in there first. It's sort of like the the person who's in a band and then they go solo and they end up in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, for both.
Stevie Nicks.
How many years have they been doing this?
I know at least since 2019.
Okay.
So I know they've been doing at least, the past 5, 6 years.
Yeah, part of me would be interested to see like what's already in there.
Yeah.
Well, and I was thinking with it only being 2019, it explains why Resident Evil and Metroid aren't there yet.
Yeah, this is a fairly new thing.
Yeah, if this had been going for 15, 20 years and they were still on this list, like, something is wrong, right?
Yeah.
Something is wrong here.
But, like the flip side is I could see if they were starting chronologically trying to get through and you're like, okay, well, like I know last year they put in Computer Space, right? Like, so arguably the first video game, right? So like you can kind of see something like that and go, oh, well, that makes sense.
Totally fair.
Why that gets in. Pong. Like you can start looking, Colossal Cave. You can start looking at those classic games and say, oh, well, that makes sense. These games are in there first. But, this seems like a mix, right? You have Asteroids and Elite mixed in here with You Don't Know Jack.
Yeah.
Like there's a few decades separating those games. So I have that trouble, like trying to pick 4. So if I picked 4, I kind of looked at Myst, SimCity, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and Ultima.
So we all agree on Tony Hawk, and that's it.
I don't think. Did you have Tony?
I had Tony.
Okay.
But, I make that list, and I would say, Resident Evil belongs in there. Metroid belongs in there. Guitar Hero, Asteroids, Elite. I think most of these belong in there.
I was about to say, whoever created the list did a decent job of putting ones in there which is probably why Tokimeki's on there, is because if it is one of the if it is the original dating sim, again, it looks like part of the criteria here is what is introducing new genres and pushing the breadth of games.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like something like Neopets, I just have no familiarity with it, other than like the concept. Like I've never played it. I don't know really anything. I know it was big-ish, but like I
remember sitting in the computer room, spending my whole 30 minutes that I was allowed on the computer playing Neopets, and then sitting right next to my sister while she spent her whole 30 minutes playing Neopets.
Right. But like I couldn't tell you if that game was bigger than RuneScape.
Same.
Sure.
Same.
Or like, how those two compare, other than like they were things kids were playing because they were browser based.
And I think that's why, as much as I love old school RuneScape, why I think like it's on here as compared to something like that is looking at it as an introduction to games for, I said, demographics that were maybe typically not reached in terms of like, when I think of Neopets, I typically think of obviously kids and specifically younger girls.
I was going to say that was one of the things, Neopets and Webkins were two of those things that that being a young girl who played, you didn't run into the, oh, well, that's a girl game. Like everybody played Neopets.
Yeah.
Like even the people who would be like, ew, you're playing video games? They got on and played Neopets.
Yeah. Well, I think, and so I could see that as an argument for it that, hey, this is one of the games that start to democratize video games so that they were as acceptable for girls to be playing as they were for boys, which is always a misleading statement because like when I was a kid, my sister was playing Atari and Commodore 64 with us. She may not have played it as much, but she played it. And my cousins, when they came over, they'd play video games. So this whole idea that like little girls weren't playing video games is really a lie because girls were. They just quit.
Yes.
Right? Like they would quit around middle school usually and not play as many video games. But like you ask somebody my age, you ask a woman my age, and they'll almost invariably tell you, oh, I had a Nintendo when I was a kid, right? And it's not, oh, it was my brother or my dad's. It was mine, right? But like I think you're right. Like Neopets makes that more like broadly acceptable that, oh, this is a thing that girls are doing because like they're playing the same game the boys are playing, and everybody's playing this game. And it's not the sort of thing that
Well, and you didn't have the other girls being socialized to look at you and be like, ew, video games, and you didn't have the boys being socialized to look and say, ew, that's a girl video game.
Right. And I almost feel like something like a Neopets would be like a good political decision in the sense of like, this is a video game, you know, where people, you know, like, you know, the type of I think we've talked about it before is like, somebody who's playing Candy Crush might not like identify that as a video game. So like putting Neopets into the video game Hall of Fame, you know, like solidifies it as it's, you know, sort of in its position in like games history.
Because I think that was a big part of why why I didn't have that is because people didn't think of it as a video game. They thought of it as a computer game, and somehow that was different.
Oh, I've known people like that. I've known people that parents who would let their kids play computer games, but not console games.
The Oregon Trail is there's something different about that as compared to Mario Bros.
It's the dysentery, son.
But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting list. I think it's a well thought out list. Like Ultima's an interesting choice on there. I know Wizardry was nominated last year and didn't get in. And Wizardry is the basis for basically all Japanese role playing games. It's an American game, but all Japanese role playing games grow out of that. And so, you know, Ultima is a very important RPG franchise.
So will they only choose one of these or?
No, they generally choose 4.
Okay, so that's why the 4's there. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, but like, I don't think there's anything that they can't be renominated, right? So like when Mario was talking about the baseball player who gets nominated every year, and you know, of course we have the senior committee.
Yeah, they eventually, I think they get 10 years of eligibility for baseball, but like the NFL, you're eligible forever, basically. But there is, a senior committee where it's like after you've fallen off the ballot, you can be nominated or something like that. But yeah.
And you do get a lot of those players who weren't big names playing in big markets that don't get on to the senior committee. And I think that's the issue that you run in, like looking at this list, there are much more splashy names on here, like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and Resident Evil and, you know, Neopets and Metroid and Guitar Hero. Like those are just going to inevitably outweigh things like Elite and Ultima, and certainly Tokimeki Memorial, because you have to be of a certain age to even know what those things are.
Yeah, and you know, it's asking for the 4. The 4 I listed are the 4 I'm most familiar with. I mean, maybe not Neopets, but like I'm familiar with it just sort of generationally.
Yeah, and even for me, like, you know, I didn't put Resident Evil and SimCity, but I'm like, those are valid. Versus like Elite, I'm like, I have no clue what this game is.
Right. Yeah. A couple of last stories here. I'm trying to skip over a couple of these real quick. Larian Studios is not planning Baldur's Gate 3 DLC or a Baldur's Gate 4. They are moving on to an original IP.
Honestly, I think this is the best decision because Baldur's Gate 3 has blown up so much that like whatever they do next is not going to live up to it. So like if you move on to a new franchise, you aren't trying to do DLC and you aren't trying to do a sequel, then at least people aren't like, oh, you ruined Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly, I sort of feel the same way about them not doing a Baldur's Gate 4. It's like good for them to move on to something new, to like that. If this sort of gave them, I don't know, the confidence or like we can do this sort of like with our own story or our own characters. I think it's a little surprising for them not to do DLC, but I also understand like we're done with this. It's over. Enjoy what we gave you. We're going to move on.
They said they actually started on DLC and then they decided like their hearts just weren't in it.
Yeah.
I respect that.
Yeah. Same.
And I kind of see this as like, the opportunity to like, hey, look, they've been making original games. Like, so they're the makers of the Divinity original Sin games. So I can see them doing this like, hey, we went high profile. This is like the film director who does a Marvel film and then like kind of goes back to doing like their passion project.
You do one for the studio and one for yourself.
Yeah. And so I can see this as, hey, we raised our profile. All these people who love this game are going to be interested in whatever we do next. let's go do something where we're building value for ourselves, not for somebody else, because we don't own the Dungeons and Dragons license.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it does make sense. I can see it being disappointing to fans,
Sure.
but like, and I love that game, but like,
Ultimately, he's like, well, you got to just get over it.
yeah.
That's all you can really say.
The other thing I wanted to talk about here real quick is the Department of Justice is suing Apple over their smartphone monopoly. And they cited cloud gaming as an example of this monopoly.
I'm confused.
So basically, they're saying that Apple has a monopoly over smartphones. So specifically in the U.S., where they actually do control a majority of the market, not worldwide, but in the U.S., particularly among teenagers, is something like over 60% of teenagers have an iPhone versus an Android.
Dang.
I'm sorry, say that number one more time.
I think it was over 60%.
Okay.
I believe that.
Yeah, if you talk to our students,
I would believe it.
they by far have iPhones.
Yeah.
Which is always a little surprising to me because they're more expensive, and like I would assume students would have the cheaper one, but like
Mommy, Daddy are still paying for them.
that's probably true.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they're saying that the full case, lots of different accusations. So there's accusations about CarPlay in cars, and there's accusations about iMessage and how they use that, and so. The cloud gaming is just one little nugget of this. But like as we talked about with the stuff with Microsoft and preventing them from releasing an app originally so that they could do cloud streaming on the iPhone, because they wanted them to submit each game individually off of the cloud gaming app so that they could review that, and basically just made it impossible for them to release an app. So the government is stepping in and saying, hey, we feel like you have a monopoly, you're abusing it. And a lot of people in the tech industry are going, hey, wait a second. There's a lot of things you can accuse Apple of doing wrong, but being a monopoly, it doesn't seem like one of them. Because it's not like you can't walk into any phone carrier in the country, any AT&T or Verizon store, and find plenty of other options other than the iPhone.
I think that's why I'm so confused, because I'm like,
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you could also be accused of having anti-competitive practices if you like use your control. So like what a lot of people have said is Apple has unfairly used their control of the iPhone to block out competitors on the iPhone. So things like there's been issues with like Spotify, and like, so Apple has Apple Music, and then Spotify wants to compete with them, and they make Spotify pay them 30% of a new membership that signs up through the app, and that puts Spotify at a competitive disadvantage, which benefits Apple. Something like that, I think they can probably make a coherent argument over. It's just really hard to make an argument that Apple's a monopoly.
Yeah.
I mean, like I don't know, what do you all have?
I have an iPhone.
iPhone.
I have a Samsung.
Okay, so you have an Android, right? So out of the four of us, there's the option, right? Like if you don't want an iPhone, you can go get a Samsung.
And
Yeah,
the only
I
reason-
hate Apple I hate Apple products. I hate all of it. So
So in grad school, I learned that I could not have a PC laptop because I would break that every 2 years. I was getting a new one. MacBooks I'm able to keep because they're sturdier. My iPhone plays well with my MacBooks. And so it's like one of those things. Otherwise, I'd probably have a Samsung. Although I will say I also love cameras. And so iPhone tends to have a better camera depending on if I get the fancy one or not. That
was always the thing, was iPhone had a better camera,
Yeah,
Android had a better battery life.
But
That's my problem with Apple, is like once you get one Apple product, you have to have everything Apple.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that you have to. It's just that they play well with each other. They communicate with each other.
You don't
and
have
I'm lazy.
to, but you have to.
If you're lazy, yes.
I've never had anything other than an iPhone in terms of like a laptop or anything like
Not
that.
lazy.
But I do get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's, I think, part of the argument about anti-competitive practices, right? The fact that your Apple Watch works really well with your iPhone, which works really well with your MacBook, right? Like that, all of that, and that Apple might not be making that as easy. So, like, for example, you can't use an Apple Watch with an Android phone. Like, you have to have an iPhone to use the app to set it up and everything.
Yeah.
So,
But Apple isn't stopping Samsung from creating some type of watch or something.
which they
like
have,
that. Yeah.
right?
So to me, it's not monopolizing so much as it's just like being smart with how
the
well
name
their
brand.
software plays with each other.
I mean, and this is what the EU has been fighting Apple over,
Yeah.
right? Like, so for example, Apple has locked Epic Games out of the iPhone. They've shut down their account, right? So there's no Fortnite on Apple products anymore. I think on the computers you can still play it, but like not on the iPad or the iPhone. And so people say, well, that's anti-competitive, right? Like, you're damaging this other competing company who's trying to sell a game on your platform. I think you can make an argument for that. I think Epic has a really bad argument. But there's a little bit more of an argument there than saying like the iPhone is monopolistic on its own, right? Like, like everybody knows that's not accurate. One of the things that they argued in the lawsuit that I read was somebody had posted excerpts from it, but like they particularly argued that if you Apple was forcing car manufacturers to use the full CarPlay system, and that they couldn't just pick the parts of it they wanted to use. And like my understanding, like, so my mom has a car that has CarPlay in it. You don't have to use CarPlay at all. Like, in fact, if you don't have an iPhone in the car with you, it doesn't even turn on to the CarPlay. It just uses the built-in system.
I hate CarPlay.
Yeah. It's creepy. Like I've rented several cars with CarPlay, and I want to say one of the first ones I connected it, and I could still track that car even after I returned it, which was freaky to me. I was like, oh no, and I haven't done it since.
Just give me a USB cord.
Yeah.
But see, I have a friend who travels a lot, and she told me that CarPlay is a deciding factor for her, like what car to rent. Because she said, then every car I get into works the same. She said the nav system and everything. Yeah. And I was like, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Because she said, otherwise I'm learning a different system every car I pick up.
Yeah.
If it's a Toyota or Honda or whatever.
For sure.
But yeah, we'll see how this plays out. This is, like all these sorts of lawsuits with the government, this is probably going to be a few years in the making.
It's interesting nonetheless.
Yeah.
They just don't get technology. They're always so far behind. I mean, TikTok as an example, but like just all of they're always just so far behind with trying to put out laws when most of them don't understand what the software or hardware, for that matter, does.
You have a bunch of 70-year-old men trying to pass laws about how technology works or how women's bodies work. And
they don't know how it works.
They're equally obtuse about both of those.
Yes.
These are the men who needed their children to put black tape over the blinking red clock on the VCR.
Right. All right, let's wrap it up there because we've already hit 2 hours. Let's end with our big question. So our big question this week comes from our constant listener, Derek, who sent this one in. If you could go back in time and completely rename any video game's title, what game would you pick, and what would the new title be? So if you could go back and change the name of a specific game, or I guess maybe a franchise, what would you change? And Christina, why don't we start with you?
I have a good answer. I don't have a good answer for what I would title it, but I have anyway. So one of my favorite games when I was a little kid on Super Nintendo was Tetris Attack, which was based on the Japanese panel de pon, right? That basically all they did when they moved it over to America was just like wipe all the fairy stuff off of it and plant Yoshi and a bunch of friends. And so if none of that sounds familiar to you, but you played Pokemon Puzzle League, it's basically the same game.
It's been released under several different names over the years.
Yes. Yeah. And a huge thing with calling it Tetris Attack is folks got fussy because it's a puzzle game, but it's nothing like Tetris. And so there was a lot of controversy when it came out, and that's why it had to be released in other genre or in other like forms, so like Pokemon Puzzle League and things like that, because Tetris was like no. They gave the okay and then realized that they had screwed up basically. But then the trouble came when I was like, okay, but what would you rename it? There's already a Yoshi game that is kind of like a puzzle game, so you can't just call it Yoshi. So I was like,
there's two
Is
Yoshi
there two?
games. There's Yoshi and Yoshi's Cookie.
Oh, Yoshi. How could I forget Yoshi's Cookie? I've never played that one.
No, because I get them confused.
Oh, see, Yoshi I know is the one that has the little blocks that drop and you have to
Yeah.
switch them over and stuff like that, and you have the little eggs and it goes meow meow. Like the sound effects for that game make me happy. But I was like Yoshi Strike. I don't know of a good name to replace it, but I definitely would replace it because the name is one of those that it ends up being controversial in the Puzzle League world. So that would be my answer.
I feel like Ryan would also have very strong feelings on this.
Yeah. Perfect.
Alicia, what about you?
So one of the important things to know about me is that I am terrible at titles and naming, and it is just the bane of my existence. I really didn't know what to do for this one, but a video that I was watching recently reminded me of how good the PS2 Teen Titans game was. So I would add a subtitle to that. Just, I don't know what it would be, but some kind of subtitle to indicate how meta the game is, in that it's the Teen Titans. They've been put into this video game, and they're trying to figure out how they got turned into video game characters and all of that. So I don't know what subtitle I would add to indicate that, but adding some kind of subtitle to give a better idea of what the story of the game is rather than just Teen Titans.
Right. All right. Sound like Teen Titans Go to the Movies.
Yeah.
That's actually a good movie. That would like surprised me.
It is better than it has any right to be.
Yeah. Mario.
All right, so I have two answers. The first one is a franchise, and so it would just be renaming sort of all of them. So it would be Kingdom Hearts would just be Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories would become Kingdom Hearts 2. Kingdom Hearts 2 would become Kingdom Hearts 3. Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days would become Kingdom Hearts 4.
Okay,
No, but that
You'll-
can't be
you'll
4.
see.
It's set chronologically before.
It's fine. It's Kingdom Hearts 4. Kingdom Hearts Birth
This is how
by,
we get to 2.8.
Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep is a prequel. We can call that one Kingdom Hearts 0. That's fine. Yakuza did it and it worked great.
Resident Evil as well.
So that's what I would do with that one. And then a more serious answer, though, would be changing 999, the 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors.
yeah.
So the sequel is Virtue's Last Reward, and the third game is Zero Time Dilemma. I would just change it to fit more thematically with what like the game is getting for. So there's a title of one of the songs in the game that's Morphogenetic Sorrow. That to me is like so much closer to like what is like what the feeling of that game is.
That sounds like a video game name.
Yeah.
And so like I said, I think the Zero Escape trilogy is really good. I think 999 is like the one game title that sticks out of the three,
Right.
even though it's the first one.
Even like giving it all of them a subtitle, a 999 adventure, or
Sure.
something. Like I know the Knives Out films. Like they did that.
Oh yeah.
They gave
Glass
the second
Onion, a Knives Out story or something.
right, and the director really didn't like that.
Yeah.
Like he didn't. But like it is one of those things. Like a lot of people would not know that's a Knives Out film.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, James Bond can kind of get away with it, but are there many other franchises that can?
Yeah, they sort of retroactively did that with the zero escape. So like it was on the DS, it was just 999, 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. And then Virtue's Last Reward was zero escape, Virtue's Last Reward. Zero time dilemma is zero escape, zero time limit. And so they kind of retroactively did that to 999 of calling it zero escape. But yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I have a couple of answers. So one is I would rename all the Resident Evil games worldwide to Resident Evil because it's a better name than Biohazard. So I would just drop the Japanese title and call all of them Resident Evil. I would also like somehow strain out the Super Mario Brothers 2 debacle. And, and maybe just call it Super Mario Brothers 2 Japan and Super Mario Brothers 2 USA, which is what Super Mario Brothers 2 in the US is called in Japan. It's called Super Mario Brothers 2 USA. So I might just give them both those titles instead of the Lost Levels and Super Mario Brothers 2 USA and all the confusion that creates, because I think it always is frustrating when games have different names and different territories.
You get the same thing with some of the early Final Fantasies.
Yeah, so they're numbered differently.
Yeah, it's like 2 and 4 are the same or something like that, but yeah.
Yeah. And then so the other answer I had is Gal Gun. And so Gal Gun is a game where you are shooting girls in order to like get them to potentially flash you. So I feel like that, you know, you're not actually shooting them. Like you're not shooting them with a gun or bullets or anything. So I feel like it should just be given a much more straightforward title. And so I thought, well, it's an FPS, right? So what about first porner shooter?
I was worried about where that was going. I was like, if he says, show me your boobies, like, I'm not going to be able to handle it.
I would never.
Maybe I don't know you as well as we talked about before the show started.
I just feel like just name it what it is.
Yeah.
Like not quite as as blunt. I was trying to stay in the game mindset.
The cleverness
Fair.
of it still being FPS.
Yeah.
So
It's like Fashion Police Squad.
yeah. So anyways, those are our retitles of games. If you have suggestions for our big question, you can send those to justin.young@siu.edu. You can also send your comments, feedbacks, your angry comments about us putting Neopets into the Hall of Fame.
I think you mean the attitude about being shocked that Neopets would go in the Video Game Hall of Fame.
Or if you have a friendlier explanation of what Monopoly might be.
I just said it's Monopoly.
You can send those in. You can also check out past episodes and some other content at salukigames.com. And thank you for listening. Thank you, Alicia and Christina and Mario, for joining me. And we will be back soon with another episode.